So next we're going to talk about governance. We touched on this at the beginning. We went through the CAF framework. So governance, really, this is probably where you'll begin your planning and your designing of how your Azure environment is going to look. So starting off, sounds pretty simple, but starting off with a naming convention. Every resource needs a name within Azure. A baseline naming convention is something that you'll need to come up with. Quite often, people use like a functional way of describing resources. So looking at the workload, the function in that workload, is it an app, is it a database? What environment does it sit in? Is it dev? Is it production? Is it DR? These are all things you need to think about, and it's something you need to carry on through for the whole of the environment. It's something that needs to be in place before you start trying to build infrastructure as code for your landing zone. There's quite a lot under the CAF framework online that you can find with suggestions from Microsoft, the things that they think work, and you can adapt those and make them your own. The next is a tagging policy. Tagging is something that you probably will realise you need once you're already using Azure for a while. The advice from Microsoft is just tag everything, and try and think ahead of how do you want to get information back out of Azure. Some of the examples for tagging policies could be around costs, so like an accounting way of putting tagging in place. So perhaps tagging resources by department, or by project, or by that region. So when you get your bill from Microsoft at the end of the month, you can look at tagging as a way of filtering through that and showing where are the costs. I'm spending X amount with Microsoft Azure. Where's the majority of that cost going? And it's a way of there's a lot of companies that charge back for different budgets within their business. And you may want to do sort of a classification of what a resource is, from a criticality point of view. Do I have what are my crown jewels? Do I want to have that tagged? Do I want to have, this is the workload with the highest SLA? Or, what do I want to be able to tag and flag what the purpose is of that resource? So rather than trying to fit it all into the name, can I tag, does this belong to part of a business process? Is this something that's, critical for the business? Is this resource associated with, revenue impacting if it was to go down? Stuff like that is really helpful if you want to look at where you want to perhaps spend your budget or get more budget. You can go to the business and say, these are the revenue impacting resources that we've got. I would like to extra budget to be able to do X, Y, and Z. Make these more secure. Make sure that we're not in a position where we're losing these resources when we need them to help us make money as a business. So the next thing we want to talk about is the hierarchy and really the organisation of your resources. So there's 4 tiers really here. The first is resources. You will be pretty much aware what they are: VMs, SQL databases, VNets, all these sorts of things, all the objects that you create within Azure. Those objects can be grouped into resource groups, and you would generally do this as a group of resources for a specific application or a workload, or something that has a shared timeline. So something that gets created together, something that gets updated at the same time, something that will have a common set of permissions, something that will get sunsetted as perhaps an application further down the line altogether. That would be the sort of things that you'd want to put together in a resource group. So subscriptions are the next level up, and really that's about taking resource groups of resource groups, and putting these similar resources into logical collections under subscriptions. So this may well be, we spoke earlier about having a prod, a dev, a test. These may well be how you deploy your subscriptions. Everything within prod is going to have a different set of permissions from perhaps what's in dev. What's in dev may be a little bit looser. There may be more things that you can do because it's somewhere that you develop. For prod, that might need to be much tighter. So do I want people to be able to just deploy any machine types that they want? Do I want to set budgets for production? Do I want to set budgets for dev to make sure that people aren't not looking after the environment and are not shutting down things when they're not using them? And then the top one there is management groups. And management groups is something that Microsoft put in there that allows you to basically replicate what you have as a business, your business structure. So in here you might have different departments. You might have, HR, and then you might group subscriptions that have all the HR applications in. The same for finance. Things that necessarily go beyond what you can put together in a subscription, multiple subscriptions sitting in there. You can do this all through management groups. So what's the reason for being this organised? Other than it makes sense. Everyone likes to be organised. Everyone likes to know where things are. But really, it's so you can apply, RBAC permissions, which we spoke about earlier. It's so you can apply budgets. It's so you can apply policies. And Azure Policy is what we're going to talk about next. So Azure Policy allows you to add policies to help stay compliant, and it's really important as it provides guardrails for your Azure infrastructure. It's a free tool within Microsoft Azure, and it really is pretty much the most one of the most important ones in there. You need to really sort of think about what you want to do from a policy point of view and where you want to implement those policies. If you're looking at something too high within the within the structure, you can end up giving out too many additional permissions, or too looser permissions across whole subscriptions. If you go down too low and start trying to do stuff at a resource level, you might find yourself kind of repeating yourself throughout all of the repeating yourself across multiple subscriptions, multiple resource groups, and that becomes a bit of an admin nightmare. So it's a really powerful tool. It prevents it can prevent misconfiguration. So say on a production environment, you could block having an open any rule for your network security groups. So someone tries to implement something, they don't lock it down properly, that will get flagged by Azure Policy. You can actually stop them from being able to implement that NSG for that particular subnet. You can do things like restricting locations where you can deploy it, or we mentioned earlier VM SKUs. If you want to stop people from when you give people freedom within perhaps like a development environment, you don't want to be able to run the most expensive things like the M series, GPU, stuff like that, because you're worried about the expense of those running. You can block those and just make it's not an option that VM can be size can be deployed. Policy evaluates everything across all of your Azure resources and the guest VMs as well. It can be used to generate compliance events. So if there is something out there that isn't right, you can get an alert. And using tools like automation, you can turn that alert into a remediation. So you can have Azure set in like an audit mode where it will basically say I found this and it will report it back, or you can have it in if this is wrong, change it. And so it really is a powerful tool and something that you can do to make sure that once you're established with your landing zone and your workloads are starting to come on, you're staying compliant for everything that you need.